I still look at Evo 5-star and go, oh, I haven't had that one. Maybe I should get an R420 Caterham.
I was very, very tempted to say, for my 38k, I'd buy a new leather interior for Ferrari 456.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have enough money.
Or BMW M will have a new line in tanks. Who can tell? Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Car Podcast with Chris Harris and his friends. I'm reliably told by the other Chris that the number 27 has other meanings within the story of Formula One. What are they, Chris Cooper?
Well, Gilles Villeneuve.
Yep.
Alan Jones had it. Patrick Tambay had it. I think Mario might have it briefly as well. Yeah.
Ayrton Senna had it.
Yeah, Ayrton Senna, after his crash in 1989 with Alain Prost, when he relinquished his world champion to the wily Frenchman, in 1990, took the number 27 and put it where the sun don't shine on Alain Prost's Ferrari.
Yeah.
If you may remember.
That was the day he called the flat. That was the day he called the flat I lived in.
Yes, you did tell us this story.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back to you, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Just for those playing bullshit bingo this week, Manish has just stepped in, I think, before the first minute. So I think this represents a new record for all of you playing this game. Ladbrokes will be shitting themselves.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with what was almost called an emergency podcast. Neil on the WhatsApp group was like, is this an emergency podcast? It might meet the criteria. We've then realised there are no criteria for an emergency podcast. We'll decide what the emergency is. But Mercedes-Benz is bringing back the V8 gasoline, petrol-powered engine in many of its vehicles, but especially the AMG vehicles. So Ola Kalenius has stood up and done what no CEO wants to do and said, yeah, we got this wrong. We're bringing back the V8. And I have to say, there's no schadenfreude here. There's no smugness. We're just really, really pleased that it's happened. Chris Cooper, what do you think about it?
I think it is good news. I think it's sort of not quite new news. There was an original announcement about this back in August 23 that they were going to bring back a hybrid V8 into those cars that had the 4-cylinder hybrid with the 1 million horsepower. Turns out something called a C63 with a 4-cylinder engine isn't quite as attractive in the retail market to buyers as Mercedes and presumably their supply chain hoped it would be. I suspect everyone thought, nah, that's shit. Who wants to buy one of those? It's a V8. A C63 is a V8. They could possibly got away with a V6. I suspect that would have been tough as well. So this is where literally the jaws of imperative and destiny sort of come together, isn't it? Because the rules haven't changed. They've still got to sell a certain number of cars with certain CO2-age, increasingly so in the next few years. So I think the EU has sort of knocked that off a little bit. So it's a bit of a toss-up, isn't it? Because if they sell no cars, it doesn't really matter. They're in trouble. If they sell some cars with a good margin in it, they probably reckon, nice to hear from somebody who's in Stuttgart mission control, with the big spreadsheet, who can tell us this, that they probably calculate if we could sell some V8 hybrids, paying some fines, that's actually better than having developed all of these 4-cylinder hybrids that no one wants. It might actually be less worse off if we do that. I suspect at that level, it's just pure economics. So we've got to sell something. We'll take a hit, but at least we're selling something, and there's a bit more margin because people will pay for a V8 car the way they won't even look at. You literally couldn't give them away, I suspect. So I think it's good news. I don't think it will save Jaguar. I almost feel sorry for them, but others can comment on that because I've probably had my share. I watched the Oscars this week, 45 seconds each. I've done my bit.
Okay, I like it. I like the new brevity, Mr. C, because you've really given us a lot of detailed info. That was dense. It was like a good pate. Dense, wholesome, fulfilling.
Weighty.
No, I didn't say that. Before I hand over to Manish to give me his thoughts on this, I would like someone, please, in the comment section, I'm sure there's someone out there, a devious little mole or a worm, to tell us how many of these C63s they actually sold in the UK. Because I'm willing to bet it's fewer than 20. I have never seen one
Never
on
seen.
the road. Never seen one. Manish, what do you think?
Everything that Mr. Cooper has said. I mean, it was succinct, it was punchy, it was informative, it was everything that this podcast is. I actually think probably Ola Kalinius watches this pod, which is why Mercedes changed their mind. I think
Yes.
it's actually as simple as that. I think he just sort of watches it or listens to it and goes, those guys have hit upon something. I mean, the truth is, and we've gone on about this so much, haven't we? I don't think anybody on this pod is out to wreck the planet, but I think that there needs to be a little bit of thinking about that big area under the curve and how best to bring these energy levels down and make them greener. And I think, we were talking about Porsche, weren't we, just a very short while ago? The very idea that you produce this kind of niche product and then do something kind of dumb to a niche product, like electrifying it or actually just getting rid of it altogether. The idea that that makes any difference at all, except for window dressing. I mean, all that does, in my opinion, actually, is it brings the accusation of greenwashing and actually makes you seem, for want of a better word, dishonest. And I think there's something very honest about this. It says there's a little market out there for these things. It's not massive. It's not going to be every single car in every single city in the world. And if people want to buy them, we'll make them. Can't be bad, can it? Can't be bad.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Mr. Kleenest does watch or listen to this podcast because I know my friend Mr. Halloway would tell me. But I think we are just part of a sort of broader conversation about this subject. And I think you're right. If someone really clever with an even bigger forehead than you lot out there could tell us what we think the sort of cumulative emissions contributed by a C63 are in the last few years, I'm not sure it's huge. I'm not sure it's huge. Also, it looks like after announcement today, Germany will be making a lot more guns and missiles than it will cars anyway. So maybe it won't be a problem. Maybe they'll just write C63 on the side of a Sidewinder as it wends its way over the Ukraine.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, or BMW M will have a new line in tanks. Who can tell?
Rheinmetall. Yeah.
Is there a good G90 M5 gag in there? Right, Neil Clifford, what do you think?
Well, I look at it from my little job that I've got, which is consumer facing. And as I've said before, you can't trick the customer. If you try and give them stuff they don't like as much and it's more expensive, they don't buy it. And then you end up with, industries collapsing, people losing their jobs, GDP softening, and that connection we've got between everyone trying to do the right thing for the planet, but the connection between that and consumer. I'm on the FT website. I always, my job is looking at consumer and retail. I don't go into industrials much, which I think is where automotive sits. But it's if you can't convince someone that what they have to buy is better than what they've got already, it's not going to work, is it? And particularly C63, I think C63 is so powerful a brand. It's almost a sub-brand. It's almost AMG in a way, isn't it? That 63 is so well known to consumers.
Power for the people.
Yeah, you can't. You imagine. I don't know. The 911 suddenly becomes two-cylinder. I mean, or front engine 911 or whatever. If you start messing with something that is so historic and so iconic to Mercedes, I mean, maybe if they just would have called it the G320, maybe it wouldn't have made a big difference. I think the 63 thing for me anyway is quite a big deal. And I read that actually on Autocar, front page of Autocar today, that it's the Audi bringing back the V8 for the R8. There's a new R8 V8 coming back. So I think this slow dripping of change is probably going to turn into quite a torrent. There's everyone's slightly moving, the wind is changing, and suddenly there's going to be lots of V8s. I put it into Chat GPT.
Which version of Chat GPT?
Yeah, why is Mercedes bringing back the V8 engine? Mercedes-Benz is reintroducing the V8 engine in its AMG models primarily due to customer demand and market dynamics. The recent shift to smaller hybrid powertrains in performance models like the AMG C63 four-cylinder received criticism from enthusiasts who felt these engines lacked the distinctive character and performance associated with V8s. In response, Mercedes-Benz plans to relaunch a next-generation high-tech electrified V8 engine starting in 2026. I don't know whether that's the hybrid thing too.
Yeah.
And in addition, Mercedes-Benz is adjusting its strategy to balance electric vehicle development with the continued production of the internal combustion engine, and on and on and on it goes. None of us are anti-planet. We all want our
Yeah.
kids to live in a better environment than we do, and we all want to do our best. But probably the answer is more in fuel than it is in just electrification. Really.
It's really funny you say that. Can I just bring in just one quick thought on Formula One, which is, I think you probably all read about 10
Saw
days
that.
ago, the FIA saying much the same thing. Maybe the answer is bring back the V8 and use a
V10.
different form of fuel. Exactly. I think there seems to be, and maybe I'm joining too many dots here, but it does feel like we've sort of reacted, probably overreacted, and we may well be on some point of correction. Because again, look at the area under the curve for Formula One. We're only talking about 20 cars at 24 races. This is not sort of, planet altering, but actually, there's a message there which can actually look very, in my opinion, very hypocritical and a bit greenwashy. A litre of fuel used to get you around one lap, now it gets you around two. By no means is that in any way, shape, or form really green, is it? You're sort of kidding yourself.
Bring back
Sorry,
the screaming V10, wasn't it?
It's a sport. It's this, isn't it?
The Formula One thing is hilarious. I mean, the idea that the propulsion of the vehicle makes any difference at all when they're still being flown around the world. I know it's about the message. I find all of it quite. It seems to be just a confirmation of the way that the human race works, or the way that modern Western democracies work. We wake up one day and we decide we have to change, and it happens quite quickly. We then change, and then quite often we go, the change hasn't worked, and everyone goes, why hasn't the change worked? And there's not many things you can blame. The technology hasn't worked. We haven't adapted. In this case, I do believe the automotive sector can look in the mirror and say, we did what was asked of us. It didn't really work.
Yeah.
Yes.
And therefore, we have to decide. We either have no automotive industry and we don't have cars. A lot of people out there would like that to be the case, but equally, it's not a realistic solution. Or we can maybe sort of end up somewhere in the middle. We're not going to go back to being quite as ridiculous as perhaps it was in the 70s and 80s. But the motor vehicle, it's pretty unwasteful now. It's quite an efficient thing if it burns some fraction of crude oil and has some electricity in it as well. But it's become so politicized. You're not allowed. If I said that, if I went on to X and got into a conversation about with the EV drivers or the EV brigade, I'd just be told that we're going to come around and kill me. So, I don't think you can't be reasonable about it. But I think from our side, do we not think, well, we gave it a go, and maybe the ultimate giving it a go example is Mercedes making a four-cylinder hybridized C63.
Yeah.
And the public went, we don't want that.
We don't want that.
Do that.
No. Can I ask, just on the thing about the point that Neil made about things that the customers might not like, front engine 911. I made a front engine 911 once. It was, coincidentally, it was halfway up the hill between Bergwerk and Stahlstrecken at the Nürburgring. And rather than, it's pretty flat straight there, you top end of sort of top gear. I just decided to turn right on that straight. And that pretty much made a front engine 911.
Yes.
It wasn't very nice. So I think Neil's right. We don't want a front engine 911.
Actually, it was more mid-engine than it was front engine, but there we go.
Yeah.
There was an adjunct to this Merc V8 celebration, which was, would this help Jaguar? And Chris touched on it there. I don't think it would necessarily.
They're too far. They've. I do feel sorry for them because they haven't made money for 20, 30 years. They looked at the future, and 3-4 years ago, they looked like, well, everyone's going to have EVs by 2030. We need to go up market, baby Bentley price level, whatever it is. It's that, or what we're going to do. I sort of get it. So I do feel a bit sorry for them that actually it turns out, and maybe they, if they were honest, should have said, hang on, really? Is that really going to happen? Are we literally betting the farm on those rules? So, yeah, this won't.
There's a very big interview with the CEO in this week's Autocar, Mr. Glover, talking about the fact that they're bang on track and bang correct with strategy. So he's definitely has a different opinion to us. And frankly, for the employee's sake, we hope he's right.
You hope he's right. Someone's got to buy this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with him, but there we go. He's the CEO of a car company, and I'm sitting with a laptop on a chair, on a table in a hotel room. One of us is doing well.
You're having more fun.
I am definitely having more fun. So let's move on. Our quest using our algorithm to have an increasing value shed has now reached £38,000. So we're sort of doing a Bill Gates shed here. There's the algorithm. You got 38 grand to buy one vehicle.
Yeah.
What is it gonna be, Neil?
Well, in the olden days, I think this was maybe COVID or maybe pre-COVID, actually, pre-COVID, 2016, 2017. The only answer to this was 996 Turbo.
Yep.
It was, literally 35, 40 grand. There was no discussion. You may as well have taken every single other car off of Auto Trader and Piston Heads. If you had 38 grand, you bought a 996 Turbo. And then you wanted a man. Was there a tip? There was a tip, wasn't there?
By the way, can I stop you there? In Piston Head's vocabulary, it was always 996 TT. Remember that?
Yeah.
Twin turbo.
TTS. Yeah. But, maybe you get a tip, if you only had 32 grand, you get a Tiptronic Cabriolet or something. But the golden sweet spot was always 996 Turbo. And you take a look at that now, no chance. They're all 50 grand unless they're moon miles. So then you're like, okay, what am I going to, I've avoided being sensible, I suppose, because the sensible strategy here is, a L405 Range Rover or something. You know what I mean? We could be boring here and we're trying to entertain. So I've tried not to be boring. And then I thought, well, what would I really do? Neil Clifford 15, 20 years ago, who was, still had a bloody big mortgage and potless and had, suddenly got a little bonus of 38 grand. Not a little bonus, big bonus, isn't it? What would I buy? Can't buy a 996 Turbo. I would buy a Nissan R35 GTR.
The one you don't love.
I think that car is fantastic. I've had two of them. I should have another one. I know I've always said, and there's an element of truth in it, it's hard to love a Japanese car. You can really like a Japanese car. It's never going to break down on you. It's always going to be fabulous. But you know what? That R35 and the GTR in general, it's what a whole story of vehicles. So here we go. I'll stop my little story. I've got, and please note, Mr. Cooper, 37,950. It's in the mix of the right price. And by the way, this
You've
car
just brought a knife to a gunfight.
This car has been made more reliable, it says, by a stage two remap by
that would do it.
Yeah, and so not only is it £38,000, it's now 35. It's been made more reliable by a remap and a Y-pipe upgrade by Litchfield 610 brake horsepower with Alcan brakes and Fredo pads, whatever that.
Yeah.
And then it comes with a full HKS titanium exhaust system together with performance air filters. I mean, magic car. And if you're,
that won't have been mistreated.
I don't know why I used to drive across Wales in these things, but I used to. I don't know. I was going to a Liverpool store, the long way or something. You drive across country in Wales. It's always bloody raining.
Yeah.
In an R35, there's nothing better. Beats a 996 by a long way. Over to you, chaps.
He's laid the gauntlet down there. Right, Manish, you've got £38,000 to spend.
I don't think that is beatable, actually. Talk about encyclopedic answer as well. The car that I found, I must admit, I really enjoyed this. £38,000 is a lot of money.
Lot of money.
You really pretty much can buy anything sort of south of a Lamborghini for this. But what I have found, we actually discussed in a little ad a couple of weeks ago, and it's been a love of mine since I was a teenager, and we can actually afford this. And it's the 1986. It's even the right year, 1986 M635 CSI in red. So a little bit leggy. It is a little bit leggy, but I want that in my shed. And actually, I would never have considered that colour, except I've just been looking at this, and I love that colour. I think that kind of, BMW, is it Guards Red? Is it close to Guards Red? What do BMW call it?
Is it henna red? What red was it? It had a
Masano? No.
What was that? What was Zinnabar? Was that a red?
Zinnabar, that's Zinnabar.
It's a manual, but this was the line that I really like about this car. It says here, maybe I don't understand this, but it says it's only had 4 previous keepers from new, with the current owner of 16 years having purchased the car in September 2008 from specialist BMW dealer Damon Hill.
Yeah, he was a BMW franchise holder for a while.
Damon was.
Yeah, he was. Didn't last very long.
I like it even more. You're also driving a nice car, but that's 36,995.
Masano red, isn't it?
Well, up here it says Zinnabar is a red on an M635 CSI.
Yeah.
So I might be calling a slightly good genius shout out there, but I might have got it wrong. I'll double check whilst one of you's talking in a minute. So, Chris Cooper hasn't chosen one for 38 grand.
This is really interesting territory, 38. Okay, isn't it? I was very, very tempted to say, for my 38k, I'd buy a new leather interior for a Ferrari 456.
But you wouldn't have enough money.
And then exactly right, I realised I hadn't got enough money.
You bastard.
So I didn't do that. There was one car on Auto Trader, intriguingly enough, where they're all 38k.
Go on.
They're all 38k. I say 30k. So what was your little sort of throwing of the gauntlet earlier, Neil? What was the price you had for your car?
37,950, I think.
950. Okay. So mine is 37,990. And it is an E61 M5 wagon.
Lovely.
Yeah.
How much?
37,990.
How many miles has that done?
It's done a few. It's been busy, I think, as they say in the trade.
That'd be low mileage, wouldn't it, at that price?
It's done 59,500 miles. It's a private seller of impeccable distinction and integrity. And it is it's a 57 plate. So it's a late 07, quite early in the life cycle, but a late 07. That blue colour, what was that M5 blue called?
Le Mans?
Was it Le Mans blue? That one. So 37,990. And you go into Auto Trader and every E60, E61 M5 is about 38 grand, other than the really, really good ones. And you almost don't trust that. You think, no, hang on, you're too far from the herd at £45,000 for an M5 V10. And maybe when we get to, I'm looking at the sort of at the heavier end of the periodic table of our here, so getting down this end here, when we're getting to sort of 45, 55, we might need to run the program again. Most of Southern England will brown out when we have to run that computer to get more numbers here. That's when I might come back to the interior of a 456.
Clever Jason we need.
We do.
So we probably should talk to each other before we choose what we're going to choose here, because I've chosen a BMW M5. which doesn't furnish our long-suffering audience with an awful lot of variety, does it? But I just had I've come at it from a different angle,
Go
a
on.
bit more scatterbrained as well, oddly. So I sometimes have this notion that I want the very best of something. I've said on this podcast before that you only want two types of a car. You either want the very best one or you want the worst one. The one in between is neither fish nor fowl, and it's lost there. There's one car, and most of the time I don't want the best one. I want the high miles one that I can play with, and I can't afford the best one normally. So there is one vehicle that I would like the very best of, just because I'm fascinated to know what it would be like and whether it would still make me feel as good as it did when it was new, and that's the E39 M5. And I suppose I don't look at the very best ofs, but when Hexagon's got a 49 grand M5 with E39, I'm there going, I want to get. It's surely one of the best cars ever made. It must still feel amazing. We all crap on about how nothing's really improved since then. Put your money where your mouth is. Well, I couldn't find one for 49 grand, but what I did find one for is 44 grand. And I reckon if I went in there and I said, look, we've got this podcast, and they managed personally, and he'd sign your underpants, and Chris Cooper will do you a special spreadsheet, and Neil Cooper will give you a pair of DAPs. You'll do it for 38 grand, won't you? And he'll say yes. So I've done a deal at 38 grand for a car that's listed at £44,000. I think we're in. I just don't think it's worth 44 grand. It's done 29,000 miles. But most importantly, I'm going to buy it, put you three in it. We're going to go somewhere, and I'm going to say, are we just a bit delusional about these things? Are we viewing everything through rose-tinted spectacles? Because that's the one vehicle I think the best one of those. Surely you want to own.
Yeah.
I was involved in the sale of the best one in the United Kingdom this week.
Are you?
And it's actually called Silverstone Blue, isn't it? What's it called?
That's very light blue.
It's Le Mans. Le Mans Blue. Le Mans Blue rattan, clear glass and wood. And it began with a 5.
Yeah.
Did it?
Yeah, but it's minty. I didn't buy it. I facilitated.
Did you?
And yes, I did.
Did you guide it in?
Yes, like that.
Yeah, there you go. For those of you that don't see the podcast, you've just done very well there.
Yes, the producer just put his.
No, I was helping two friends connect together.
Yeah, okay, that's enough of that.
Yes,
the producer just put his little picture on the screen, Harris. Okay, and that's usually, for those who can't see it, that's sort of the final warning for us. Talking about producer, why does it say on the bottom of the screen, for me, Crashy Chris?
Slower. I'm now slower, Chris, which I'm quite happy to take on the chin. So that doesn't need any kind of action. So let's move on to a new section of the podcast.
Oh God!
Now, none of us probably views ourselves as natural raconteurs or storytellers. However, we quite like telling a story, and we don't see you when we're talking. It's just quite nice to basically sit there. You're very well done. To sit there and to yarn. So, for those of you that live in the UK and are about 50 years old, which I suspect many of you are, there was a television program on BBC One called Jackanory, and you'd sit there and your pulse would relax, and they'd tell you a story. Jackanory. So we're going to have our Jackanory section, and the first person to offer us a little bit of a story, and the story could be informative, it could be heartwarming, it could be silly, it could be long, it could be short, is Neil Clifford. No pressure, dearest Neil.
I've been the brave one to step forward in a sort of Dad's Army way.
Yeah.
And I was obviously racking my brains about what I can talk about here, and I can talk about car buying and buying crap cars or good cars, but actually I thought anyway, last week's podcast, the fact that maybe we've been a bit more open, a bit more human, a bit more sort of self-reflective, I thought was quite good. So I tried to force myself to do that. And I thought about why I love cars, why I love driving. And actually, the more I thought about this, and I started to sort of scribble stuff, it's not really about the car. And I mean, it's not really about the specific car. I'm not actually someone, as most people who know me, as a great driver. So I don't really enjoy the thrill of driving on the edge of anything. I'm very lucky to own quite a lot of Ponzi cars, but I don't drive them in a manner, frankly, that they should be driven or they were designed to be driven. I just enjoy um, owning them. I'm lucky to own them, and I thought I'm going to talk a bit about that because not the luckiness bit actually, the fact that I recently bought a 8 grand, 137,000 mile silver with tan, which is basically why I bought it because the color Land Rover Discovery 4, and actually I enjoy that car as much in many circumstances more than driving a 911R. And I thought that's really quite bloody interesting why that is the case. Why is that the case? It can't just be about, because the 911R, it's a cool thing, it's a rare thing, it's quite a showy offy thing, which of course human nature is. Maybe we enjoy showing off a little bit. We shouldn't sort of deny that at all. But it's not the reason why I love driving. I love that car. And so this Disco 4. So I thought, why do I love this Disco 4? I drive to and from my little tennis place. I scoot about if it's raining, if the weather's shit. But it wasn't about that. It wasn't about 4x4 and I'm not going to crash because this thing's all safe. I just thought, I love being on my own in the cockpit of a car. I just love that space. I just adore that space.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, well, why do I do that? Why is this car thing so important to me? And now I'm going to digress a little bit for a couple of minutes, if everyone can stay with me a bit.
Yeah.
I've always been so I started to think about myself. I've always been a dreamer. I've always been a schemer, I suppose. I've always been a planner. I've always had this sort of burning, not ambition in a way, but just agitation of movement. It transpires later on in life through my gorgeous son that I have ADHD. And I'm also dyslexic. So I have two superpowers. Two brilliant superpowers. And then I go on the NHS website because, you think, what, ADHD, wow, poor organised. I've listed it here. Carelessness and lack of attention to detail. Are continually starting new tasks before finishing old ones. I am a master at that. I'm an absolute master at that. Poor organisational skills, inability to focus or prioritise, continually losing or misplacing things. Terrible at that. Forgetfulness. I mean, I'm not very forgetful, actually. I forget things I'm not that interested in, but if I'm really interested, I'll remember them forever. Restlessness and edginess, difficulty to keep quiet and speaking out of turn and blurting out responses and often interrupting others. It goes on. But actually, I'm so lucky to have all these superpowers. And the reason why, I'm coming back to the cockpit, so I'm not going too deep on that front. I love travel. I love movement. The Sterling Moss comment of movement is tranquility. When I get in that car, I moved out of London. I was very, I could get the bus and get the tube 10 years ago to work, and now I live an hour away. I wish I lived 2 hours away often. When I get in that car, my wife's like, "You're mad getting up at 5 in the morning and you're driving in." I can't wait to get in that car because to me, it's my third space. It's my unselfish time on my own. And I think COVID, and I'm really rattling on now, but this is all just in my head about the last 4 or 5 years of my life. COVID messed us all up. Frankly, messed the United Kingdom up quite badly in many, many respects. A lot of it which we don't really know yet. particularly for young people, in my view. But anyway, I won't go that deep. We've all struggled with re-engaging with people, I think, a little bit, and I'm quite a peoply person. The reason why I'm a good CEO is actually I'm crap at doing one individual thing. I'm just really good at bossing people about in a very positive way, because I don't actually have to do any physical work myself. So the bigger the job I got, I was quite crap as a store manager because I'd forget to do stuff. But the bigger, I was lucky enough to be able to get, and I somehow, by chance, got better as the jobs got bigger. Can't really explain that. That's another podcast probably. But I don't know where I was going with that. I think the fact that COVID did make us all struggle to re-engage. You know, we've all got our little friendship groups that were much more solid before COVID, and now we're trying to put them all back together, and it's all a bit difficult. And people like being on their own a bit more because they got used to it. But for me, my selfish time of being on my own in a car and the peace that that space gives me, because this is an environment that has been designed by very, 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 very clever people over decades to make you feel comfortable. Now, one can judge which is the best cockpit, whether it be the BMW one or the Porsche one or the Ford one. This is an environment that has been designed to be comfortable and to be a lovely place and to be relaxing for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And I find that my calming place. It's where I have my ideas for work. I don't have any ideas at work, frankly, not many. I have it all in the morning. And then when I come to work, I try and sort of make some of them happen or, help people with their ideas. But I just really love the cockpit of a car, the music, the ability to listen to music is the only place I really listen to music now. I feel quite selfish if I get home and try and put music on because it's not the music the other people. If you lived on your own, it was fine, but otherwise you can't really do that. But when you're in the car, you can do it. It's a gorgeous space, isn't it? And then the change of light. The excitement of seeing the sunrise this morning on the A41 at 4:50, 5:55. Because the mornings are so beautiful at the minute, aren't they? And then you see the sunset going home, the different light. You can open the window, you get the smells, you get the different situations. I love driving up to Manchester or Leeds. I just love movement. I love moving about. I'm not very good at sitting still, obviously, because I've got all these things. But therefore, the cockpit, the car has been designed for me, has been designed for my personality. And then you start talking about watching those gauges and the enjoyment you have by looking at the fonts and looking at the buttons and you think, you can pretend you're a little pilot flying a World War II aeroplane, can't you? You can disappear into all these little dreams that you have. And I think you can plot your dreams on your own. You can come up with your little goals. I was always a little bit of a goal setter. I was always quite sort of stupid in that. Even though I never write anything down, I had it all in my head. You can think about your own little personal improvement strategies. It's just my favorite place is the cockpit of the car. And I bet you some people would agree with me in that because it's the unselfish, quiet space that you can have on your own and you can really think about how to, help yourself or help other people. And looking out the window and seeing a change of scenery always stimulates, my brain gets stimulated by newness. I love meeting new people, but in a car, you see new stuff. You see new stuff every day. So I think it's, for me, spending a bit of time as I did this morning very early, thinking about my little Jackanory. I adore the cockpit of the car, and I think we should all worship it more and more. That's my little story.
Yes, I think I don't think we have anything to add, Neil. I think we all completely agree with you. And
Very
thank you
good.
very much for that. Thank
Very,
you very
very
much.
good.
I would, yes, I think we'd all agree with it, and I think it's a safe space, isn't it? Just a safe
It's
space
safe
where you want to
space.
go.
Yeah.
And how many times have you not wanted to get into the cabin of a car, whatever car it is,
Never.
or even if it's a tractor
Never.
and it doesn't
Yeah.
have a cabin, it has a seat
Yeah.
and a steering wheel. You want to get in there, don't you? Get on there.
It just, or whatever situation I'm in, if I'm happy, I'm happier. If I'm miserable, I get less miserable. It just, whatever state of mind I'm in, it improves it.
Can I? There's something you made a very thought-provoking start to the discussion comparing a silver with tan Discovery 4 to your 911R. I will match the price of the Discovery 4 in return for your 911R.
Yeah, yeah. as long as long as you give me, I don't know what the maths is, what 17 Land Rover Discoveries or something. You know,
So
you know, it's actually it's a debate worth having, really.
that's a
Because
unit of happiness. It's a unit of happiness.
it's the law of diminishing returns. It's like
Yeah.
hi-fi. You know, you can
Yeah.
go out and spend 50 grand on a top end
Yeah.
lane, Lin name, pre-power. It's going to be 5% better than the
Yeah.
NAD.
But it's also it disrupts sometimes how we ought to feel that the better, more expensive, more exotic thing is more rewarding to drive. And it starts. I tell you where it starts. As a boy, it starts in your world, Neil. It starts with trainers. Because you're about 7 or 8, right? In our world, you're 7
Yeah.
or 8, and you've had those bloody awful Dunlop things at school. That's all you were allowed.
The green
And
flash.
you get no worse than the green flash. The buggers that didn't have any writing on them.
Yeah.
For the first time, your mum took you to a shop, and you were given the chance to buy a different pair of DAPs, and you got quite adventurous, and you saw a fancy swoosh on the side or something, and you put them on, and they were torturously uncomfortable. But because they were fancy DAPs, when someone said, "Is that comfortable?" you went, "Oh, they're brilliant." And you hobbled about and got blisters for days because you wanted the better
Well,
thing.
it's true.
Actually,
It's true.
the DAPs, the cheap DAPs were the discovery. And I still have that now. Quite often, I think we all persuade ourselves that some sports car or some car we've borrowed or earned is amazing to drive. But there's probably something much more ordinary in the shed that you know deep down you much prefer driving.
But you know, when I watch, you know, I'm a Chris Harris hero boy for years. Watching those, you know, you and that
I could fill
205
that for you,
versus
by
the
the way.
911R, or watching Richard Mead and watching how you guys drive a 911R. Then I would love to be able to do that, because then I think I could justify the sort of additional experience of owning the 911R. 911R to me, even though, you know, I love the technical element of it, the rarity, the manual, the 991, the blah blah blah. You know, I did hi-fi delete, so it's even more weirder. But frankly, it's just about showing off. And sometimes you don't want to show off's not that important. I love the sticky dials on my disco. I love the sort of scratches on the middle of the dash. I don't give a fuck. It's just gorgeous to
Yeah.
drive, and no one, you know, in a better way, no one looks at you. Doesn't matter. You've got this amazing, you know, as long as you've got Bluetooth, what else do you need?
I think it's interesting. I touched on this ages ago on the podcast. It took me till I was in my sort of late 30s, early 40s, and I had a motorcycle license to understand that. Because, you know, I'm lucky. I've got access to those cars, and I can drive most of them to most of their abilities. But I'm not very good on a bike. I enjoy it. I'm not like I'm in a car. And I bought a Panigale, which I love. But I can't really ride it the way it should be ridden. But I love it. I love the way it looks. I don't feel ashamed wobbling off a ferry on it or something. And everyone goes, "There's that knob that can't ride it very well." I will just stop and look at it, and I listen to it, and it's just mine. I'm really pleased, but I don't feel any shame in the fact that I can't use it all, and nor should anyone. It's yours. You chose to buy it, and you earned it. As long as you didn't steal it, all's good.
Yeah, no, but that the 911R, you know, I remember my mum coming into my room at 10 o'clock at night, and I should be in bed. I was 10 years old, and I put a torch under my pillow, and I used to look at these under my, you know,
He's holding a packet of top trumps, by the way,
Yeah.
original ones, not late ones, original ones.
And I used to plan at 8 years old, if I had 100 grand, what am I going to buy from this pack? And I've been lucky enough to, in some respects, be able to execute some of that shit because, I've been lucky. But actually, there's no more pleasure, really, 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 than driving a Disco 4 for 8 grand.
Yeah.
Right.
Every home should have one. Every home should have one.
We're going to move on now. We've got a bit of time left. So, Marmite cars has come up as a. We've touched on this before, but I don't really think you can exhaust this one. It's a fascinating title because it suggests that we think we're the arbiter of what is good or bad. Of course, we're not. That's mostly subjective, but there are definitely cars that polarize people hugely, and I'm fascinated to know what's caused this to be mentioned, particularly by Neil Clifford, who I think suggested it. So we'll start with Manish. Marmite car. How do you interpret it? And give me an example of a Marmite car that's registered with you recently.
I think it's a car that elicits an immediate response. It's not about thinking, it's about reflex. You say the name or you see it, and there it is. And some people absolutely get it. They just get it. Whatever the designer was trying to do, whatever the manufacturer was trying to do, they totally get it. And other people will never get it. And I think that's the most important thing. A Marmite car is one where you cannot convert someone to the light or the dark side of the force. It is just the Marmite car. And I think this is the ultimate Marmite car for me. And it is the Fiat Multipla.
Yeah.
For me, that is just the Marmite car. Some people get it, absolutely get it, and sit there and think, this has just been designed to perfection. I mean, there was a little caption underneath that picture. It just said something like, form, it's a function over form. So it was a kind of admission that this thing's aesthetics may not please you, but the thing is just so damn good. I think it is literally the ugliest car ever.
Oh, so this is where you don't like Marmite.
This is where I don't like Marmite. Yeah. Exactly. This is where I don't like Marmite. I honestly, I just don't get it. I will never get it. People have eulogized about this car. You know how functional it is. You can see the height. Someone can sit. I know you have. For me, it looks like a tadpole that's had a bicycle pump stuffed up its little cloaca. You can look that up.
It's just what?
Cloaca.
I thought you said that.
It is. The wheels look tiny. Everything about this, those funny lights, the Fiat logo, the way the plastic sits. It's utterly hideous, irredeemable. But I know it's a work of genius. I absolutely know it's a work of. This is my kind of visceral response. I mean, if there's Lola at one end of the spectrum, the Multipla sits at absolutely the other.
I hear
Chris Cooper, Marmite car.
Yeah, I hear that Senna had a Fiat Multipla.
Did he?
No, of course he didn't.
Oh, good, very good.
So, groan. If this was a Beano comic now, there'd be a massive speech bubble coming out of my mouth going, groan. Yeah. So we'll have Chris Cooper's interpretation of Marmite and also what is his Marmite car.
Well, I think Manish's description, etymology and the meaning, I think is really, really good. Yeah. We discussed this group once before. The car that most of us liked, and you, Mr. Harris, really just didn't like at all, was the original Defender. Yeah. This is a Marmite car which has sort of crept up on me. And the only addition I'd make to Manish's description is, if it is a Marmite car to you and where you don't like Marmite, I happen to like Marmite, the sort of the yeast-based comestible, Vegemite, as it would be called in the wrong end of the world, where everything's upside down.
The other end, not the wrong end.
Then
big love to our actually quite
I'm
sizable
teasing
Australian audience.
them.
Massive love to Australia and New Zealand.
We should
Fucking
be
good
upside down, shouldn't we? Like you see on TV years ago, we ought to be upside down.
Get back to cars.
I
We'll
don't
do
think
it
that
for
gag has
affiliation,
had enough
all right?
life. Anyway, it's the new Defender. It's the new Defender.
Yeah, I'll give
Let
you
me
that.
explain why. I thought about it. I thought about this week. I saw a couple around this week. One was on the farm here at the weekend. The 110 is just too short. It's like a bobcat behind the rear wheels. Whereas the 130 is just too long. That's just silly. It just looks like a van, and it's just the extrusion went on too long. It's really expensive. They're almost all nowadays in black with lots of big body kits in them. Present company except Neil, I know you've got one and you love it. And your chum, Paul's got one, which is a very, very tasteful spec. I see it on his Instagram. That is definitely lovable Marmite. But it's become generally, there's no Goldilocks version of it. They're almost all black and looking horrible, blacked out windows. They're very expensive. There's not much space inside them. And actually to drive, they're pretty good to drive. They're pretty good
They're
to drive.
quite good to drive.
They are pretty good to drive. I just can't get past the image. And I'm really frustrated because I think it meets its spec. It's a really, the drivetrain's brilliant. That 3 litre, I know lots of people have trouble with the Ingenium straight six diesels. But to me, the new Defender has become Marmite.
Ooh, interesting.
I accept that. It's correct. I've jumped across the hatred and love of that car via Marmite.
Interesting,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
There we go. Neil Clifford, Marmite.
I love Marmite. I think you guys have answered it better than me. I was too exhausted talking about myself.
We liked hearing about you. Don't worry about it.
No,
Back to you.
Jackanory, big nose, little nose, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Mine is the Audi RS Estate series because I've bloody bought all of them, and I've never liked one of them. Because even though I am certainly not on the last interview as an autocar test driver, they are shit to drive. It's like driving a canoe.
Yeah.
They're made of wood. And I've always wanted to, I've had RS2s, and I sell them because I don't like driving them. Then I forget because I'm ADHD, so I forget I didn't like it. So I buy another one.
Yeah.
And then I sell it for $5,000 less than what I paid for it because I'm pissed off with myself and the dash is all plastic and shit. And then I do the only one I haven't had, which you guys will all tell me is the sweet spot and that's what you should try, is the RS4. Because I've done the 8, the 6 in the V8 and V10, neither of which I liked. And I had a beautiful green, dark green, non-metallic green one, which, now everyone would be talking about, oh my God, that's such an amazing car. I really didn't like it. I didn't like the dash. I didn't like the steering. I didn't like the ride comfort. And most people treat that as Marmite in a very positive way, as did I, because I believe people and go out and buy the sort of 5-star Evo cars. I still look at Evo 5-star and go, oh, I haven't had that one. Maybe I should get an R420 Caterham.
That's brand trust. Do you know what? There's quite a bit in there.
Yeah.
I completely trust Evo 5 stars.
Yeah.
Apart from the Audi RS6. And let's hope when I get back tonight and I sit on the bog and I check, let's hope it's 4.5 stars.
It's gone down. It's gone down.
Yeah. So that's the one for me.
I think Marmite cars. It's a term I used to really dislike, but I like it quite a lot now. And it's up there with sort of Q cars as being descriptive. But the thing I like about the term Marmite cars is it tells you a bit more about yourself than maybe you first realise.
Yeah.
And from what I take from Marmite cars is I want to be in the minority. So I want to be there
Yeah.
instinctively finding stuff appealing that the majority of the population don't like, because I like being a bit of an agitator and I'm a bit of a
Contrariness.
Yeah.
yeah.
Niche.
So for me, my best Marmite car moment was probably the first time I drove an Alfa SZ in the UK, and I remember being
Oh,
up
they're
north
great.
doing a photo shoot with this thing, and we had it against a 993 that was mine that I'd sold to a friend of mine, and we were up near sort of Rutland. And all I had all day long, it was perfect. This procession of people that came along going, "What's that? It's hideous." And to each and every one, I could go, "I love it. You're wrong. I don't care what you think." And maybe that's it. Maybe the Marmite car allows idiots like me to go, "I don't care what you think."
That's a perfect Marmite car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like sitting on the side of. It's one of the few times where I probably defend the underdog. I just or just defend the. It looks like devil's advocacy because you're thinking, how can you defend William Towns's Lagonda? It just looks ridiculous from every angle, but I love it,
Yeah.
and I'm not pretending to love it. There's other stuff that's Marmite that I don't really get. That I'm not that into. You can keep your Plymouth Prowlers and all that other shit. I'm no interest in
Yeah.
that
There
at
are
all.
there are subspecies below our debate.
Yeah, I do like the idea of a Marmite car, and most of all, I do love Marmite. And at the moment, in shops, if you chew through the stuff like I do, there's a special extra strength Marmite
Oh,
with a black
it's
label that's for sale in supermarkets, and it is rocket fuel. If you want to wake up in the morning, get some of that bad boy down you. When you start to salivate when it hits the roof of your mouth, you're there going.
Well,
What?
over toasted crumpet.
Oh.
I
Oh,
was I was just about to say when Lynn and I are at the house farm by ourselves, and she'll say, "I'm about to make something to eat." I said, "Oh no, I'm not hungry." The thing that she makes that is most likely to make me think, "Oh, I'll have some of that," is Marmite on toast.
it is.
Marmite on
You could
toast.
be so unhungry
Yeah,
and eat 4 slices of Marmite
I'll
on toast.
have your Marmite and toast, Lynn.
Yes. Yeah.
Cheese
Could
on
you?
Marmite on toast is the way. I
It
love
is cheddar, a little bit cheddar.
good
Yeah.
cheddar
Oh yeah.
Marmite toast. Wow.
Could you live with or be in a relationship with or be friends with someone who actively hates Marmite?
I suppose friendship you'd have to tolerate. Not, I couldn't marry someone that hated Marmite. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, he can't. But
Yeah.
maybe
Right.
maybe all the Marmite haters marry each other.
I
Maybe they
need to,
do.
I need to assume a Paul Whitehouse voice here because I want you to tell me in this next little section your best off-road stories. And I hate to say it, whenever someone uses the phrase off-road, all I imagine is those two goons in the Fast Show going, "Let's off-road," and making it about 30 yards up some illegal byway. So let's start with Chris Cooper's off-road story.
It's the naughty pleasure, isn't it? It's the naughty pleasure. The first time you off-road, it feels ever so slightly or ever so enormously slightly naughty. Should I be doing this? Gosh, I'm actually not on, it would have been when we started driving, Her Majesty's Highway. I'm pioneering literally off the beaten track. And the first time you do that, it's almost as exciting as the first time you drive on the road because it's sort of I'm there. It's the hidden prevented land. You're driving off road. There are no boundaries. There are no rules. Well, there's some rules. Gravity. Come back to that one. But it's just that naughty pleasure of, am I actually allowed to do this? And clearly, boys and girls, there are some places where you're not allowed to do this. So listen to Uncle Chris. Always check that you have the permission of the person who pays the phone bill, whatever they said in the Blue Peter days, to drive off road. You learn some things quite quickly when you drive off road. Wet grass has the lowest mu of any substance known to mankind.
It does.
It doesn't matter what you've got in your tyres or your differentials or your anti-slip or whatever it is. Wet grass will. I think that's basically why Caterpillar tracks were invented. because it's the only way you can get away with wet grass. But I think you learn a lot about stuff which it's about mechanical sympathy. That bit where harder to do these days with modern automatic transmissions, where there can be a delay between selecting forward or rear, and there's a bit of a delay in the throttle. But you're literally in a rut, not a metaphorical rut, but an actual rut, off-road, snowy, muddy, slippery, whatever. And you get there and you apply the throttle and the thing, it will just spin. Whatever you've done to it, it'll just spin. And then in my case, it was my dad said to me, son, you've got to rock it. Now, he obviously knew that was not a dance move or anything because he'd seen me in my youth and I was not a fashionable or an outgoing or going to disco person. What he meant was a little bit of forward, and then when it starts to break traction, a little bit of reverse, and you basically build up this sort of rocking motion. And amazingly, you can overcome the laws of gravity and physics and get the vehicle out of that slippery thing. Well, I'm stuck. I need a tow. No, you don't need a tow. You just need a little bit of cleverness. So I think off-roading still feels, even now, whenever we go off-road on the farm, it still feels ever so slightly naughty and sort of a little guilty pleasure. And it's just such good fun. You learn that grass has got low mu, and you learn about rocking. I just think everyone should try it.
I agree, and I think the slightly naughty thing is it's the closest you come to drive when it snows, and you think, "Oh, I finally get the chance to use the vehicle and do all the things it can do," which is almost always the preface to an utter fecking shambles. Yeah. But it is that I'm gonna go to my options here. I'm gonna do the one with the cactus on it. I always love the one in Land Rover. What's the cactus? We'll give the cactus a go.
Who ever sees a cactus?
I know. I don't see many cacti in our latitudes. Manish, how do you feel about off-roading?
I've done it once, and it was a very unusual experience. You'll be absolutely shocked to hear that I was the passenger and not the actual off-roader. I went to Abu Dhabi for the first time in my life in 2010, and for the beer pong players, it was Senna related. I'd never, ever been into the desert before. I don't know if you've ever done that. And my hosts were very gracious and very kind. They said to me, is there anything you would like to do in Abu Dhabi before you leave? And I said, I'd love to see the Yas Marina circuit. I'd love to just go and see it. And I would love to go out into the desert. And part one...
I thought you were going to say milk a camel for a minute. Sorry about that.
I didn't say, but what was incredible was a bloke picked me up, and it was one of these desert tours. And it was a Chevy Tahoe. I remember it was 2010. It was a big car painted in kind of, come and visit the desert colors. And I have to say it was somewhere between one of the most exhilarating experiences of my life, and also, it was unbelievably terrifying at times. Because what they effectively do, you go out into the desert, and he will find the tallest dune in the desert, and they sort of diagonalize the dune. You don't go straight up the steep bit. You literally go along, and the car is slithering. It's the best way to describe it. They just try to get the best traction they can, and you'll go right up to the top. All you can see is sky.
Yeah.
And then he does it, and it's like a roller coaster. Down you go. And in fact, it was at one point I actually made a little bit of a video of me doing this, and look at this. I think our producer will probably put this little clip up for you, but it was probably the most exciting thing I did. After 30 minutes, I have to say, it was like a 30-minute roller coaster. There's a reason why roller coasters are 90 seconds long, because I don't think a human being can take that. I did have to ask him to stop. And I also remember it being a particularly beautiful moment because it was in the middle of Ramadan, and I've never been to a Middle Eastern country before that. And, they take Ramadan very seriously. And this man hadn't even drunk water all day. And it was quite beautiful. He turned on his radio. We were right at the top of a dune. You could see the sand just coming off the other dunes. And of course, Ramadan's all about sunrise and sunset, and we were watching the sun just drop, literally drop. And just as it dropped, he opened 2 bottles of water, gave me one, turned on his radio. You could hear the kind of call of the Muezzin, and it was really, really a quasi spiritual experience. It was wonderful, and just to make Mr. Cooper's, which I didn't milk it. But there is Manish with a camel. It was a very, very beautiful day. I will never forget it.
That camel was milked. Now, Neil Clifford, what would you say?
I have no interest in it whatsoever. I don't know. I've never done it. I did it once, actually, when I went to test drive the Ineos Grenadier in the middle of bloody Oxfordshire or wherever it was, on one of these courses, and you go with the man and you feel sick, and then the wife's in the back and she's double sick, and he's like, you have a go now. I'm like, I can't be really bothered with this shit. And then, what if I crash? What if I break down? What if I look an idiot? What if I get stuck? I'm all a bit worst case scenario, and I couldn't get out of it quick enough, to be honest. And it didn't influence. I still bought the bloody car, which was shit anyway. For me, I like roads.
Yeah, I get it.
Roads are better after you've off-roaded. Certainly, they have an extra niceness.
I'm much closer to Neil in this than I probably am to Chris. It's made me reflect on working life, really. My summary is I've done far more of it than I ever wanted to or ever intended to. And the reason is that when I first started testing cars for a living, there weren't that many off-roaders. The SUV hadn't really appeared in Europe. We had MPVs. If you had a family, you had an Espas or a Scenic. And so then really, every now and again you'd get the off-road test for the magazine, but it would happen every quarter, at most. And then suddenly these things exploded, and the only way that the manufacturers could justify giving us such massive, frankly useless shit boxes was to point us towards what they could do off-road. So we'd be taken off round the world to drive these things in totally ridiculous locations to justify why they'd be quite useless at doing the school run between Barnes and Hammersmith. So the whole thing was preposterous. But I did get exposed to a lot more off-roading than I expected. I suppose my off-road story has nothing to do with that at all. In fact, I wasn't even in the car. I might have told this story before. If I have, I apologise, but I love it so much. I can't use the name of the journalist involved. I think he still practices in my trade, actually. But there used to be a dictaphone that sort of floated around Autocar, and that dictaphone sort of everyone used it, and this was well before iPhones or anything. Useful thing, had a tape in it, one of those old-fashioned ones. Lovely little tapes. They're lovely little objects to look at.
Little tiny ones, a little micro cassette thing.
Nice.
Anyhow, this thing floated around, and it ended up in the care of someone who then left Autocar. He didn't steal it. I think it might have been his, and he'd lent it to us, maybe. Anyhow, this guy worked at another title within the Haymarket organisation, let's say a bit more motorsport based. And he's phoned me on the internal phone lines, and he's gone, "Get round here now. You got to hear this. It's important." So I get there after lunch, or probably during the afternoon, and I'm sitting there, and he goes, "You've got to listen to this. Presses play." And what we hear is this journalist attempting to go off-roading in a Vauxhall Frontiera press car. And it's quite clear that they're somewhere where they shouldn't be. In fact, they are in the grounds or in the wider estate of Blenheim Palace.
Oops.
And they're going green laning, and the thing gets stuck. And there's quite a bit of panic. It's a Frontiera, and this thing gets stuck. Now, what you don't hear until a while in is the second voice, which is female. So he's got his girlfriend with him, this person, and he's clearly thought, "I'll show her how I can off-road," with that sort of fast show voice. And things get a bit wrong. So what happens is they just get stuck. And he doesn't do what Chris calls rocking, because he's got no idea what he's doing.
Different kind of rocking he had on his mind.
Well, no. But the problem is that the dictaphone at that point was obviously dormant within the pocket or trousers of this person. But when that type of rocking obviously became the only option for them because they were stuck, somehow the recording device was activated. So what we got was a lot of rustling, quite a bit of chat that wasn't about the Frontier's locking differential, but we did hear quite a lot about other things. This tape was fantastic. The vehicle, apparently, we wrote was poor off-road, and all I remember is that I think myself, that person, and someone else was summoned by Vauxhall to go on their internal off-road course to prove how good the Frontier was. But I have never heard such stinky chat in my life. But from the sounds of the recording, it did work.
Very
I
good.
remember the Frontiera. That was what,
Off-road contribution. So
what was that? 1990. When was the Frontiera?
Mid-late 90s. It was made in Luton.
Yeah, I
think it was
remember.
the last car-ish to be made in Luton.
what was and it was a piece of badge engineering. What was it originally?
Isuzu?
And what was Isuzu what?
Oh, chipbox? I don't know.
Isuzu Mu. Is what
Okay.
it was.
I knew it was an Isuzu, yeah.
Yeah. So moving on, two car garage. I've got 10 minutes left before I get lobbed out of my rally. So two car garage is very simple. I like this. Again, brevity from Mr. Cooper.
Oh, it's Cameron Cooper, this one. Yeah.
Was it Cameron? Thank you very much, Cameron, for brevity. Here we go. So we are at, you have £200,000 for two cars with the most emotive engines. Road cars only, no messing with restos.
Yeah.
I'm going to go first. I've got this nailed. I'm happy.
No,
with
you
it.
haven't.
I've got this nailed. So there's one car I have to have. So I've had to compromise on the other car, but I've had a result. Because you're all going to go for 12s and 8s and all that bullshit. And you're going to forget that a high revving four-cylinder engine is something to behold.
I didn't forget.
So the best of these, or the most exciting of these, when it was launched, and still is, the Honda S2000. That thing is absolutely extraordinary. I still get in them and go, how on earth did they release this in 1999 with a warranty? So Honda S2000, and then
you've got £196,000 left.
Yeah. We don't need 200 grand for this one.
It's my yellow car, 991 GT3 Touring with an Akrapovic exhaust. That's the engine for me. You can keep your 12s and your 8s. So I get lots of time in them at the moment. I'm very lucky. I always get back into that little yellow shit box, and I love it. It's the engine. So there you go. Neil Clifford, where are you at?
Right. Well, I'm matching you on the Porsche, but I'm going I'm going back one step. I'm going last of the Metziger.
Right.
Yeah.
997 GT3 3.8 Gen 2. Bargain of a car at 90 grand. You know, you don't need the RS, you don't need the 4 litre. It's all the same bullshit like the hi-fi thing. Just get that 90 grand. Brilliant engine. And then look, of course you're going to have a Ferrari V12. You're going to go and buy an FF. They're in the 90s now.
Yeah.
They're not 129 anymore, Matthew. You know, what you're going to write a check for could be 85. Ferrari FF.
Yeah.
Pisses on all the newer ones. And that engine, it's actually how they made that legal, that noise. You know, because the GT4 Lusso doesn't sound half as good as an FF.
No.
That startup on an FF is the bollocks. And you've got 30 grand left for warranty work.
Which you'll need.
Fortunately.
Manish, where are you going with this?
Well, I mean, for me, it's emotion with an engine isn't necessarily just the sound. It is slightly experiential. And I can tell you that the car that I was most excited by as a child, that I actually saw moving on the street, but more importantly, saw moving on a screen, was the Lotus Esprit S1 in Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh.
And I remember in my teens, a friend of mine, when we were 19, he bought one, and it was an S1. And I've never, that feeling of being in the cinema and seeing Roger Moore drive it around, and you've spoken about the real stunt man and how he did those stunts. Hearing that car start and hearing my friend Sean rev it, and it is, you can't believe Chapman got that kind of power out of 4 cylinders, revving like that, making that noise. And we would go for short drives in it. And it was probably the most exciting noise I had ever heard from a car. You know, both on screen, but also in real life. So Lotus 3S1. I found a mint one from 1977, completely rebuilt for £70,000. That sounds like a lot of money, but it's in the original white, perfectly restored. Not a resto mod, just beautifully restored with the original Bond tartan inside. And the second one, very similar reasons. When in 2011, I was invited to a really beautiful party to celebrate Ferrari and also to talk about the Senna film again. And he was the Ferrari Automotive Club captain of Rome, loaned me, but with his chauffeur, he wouldn't let me drive it, his 430 Scuderia. It was absolutely beautiful. This beautiful Rosso Corso thing. And basically the driver shot me around.
That's a good noise, Scud.
Hard and fast with the windows down. The noise coming off the Roman antiquities as we blasted through nighttime Rome. That was literally the only thing that's ever matched that rather stunning Lotus. They are my two emotive. You can buy one of those for 80, a good one for 80. So I've got £50,000 left.
For a retrim.
For a retrim. You're right.
Chris Cooper, what are you going to go for?
So I know we're tight on time, but actually, Manish, you did read the exam question there. The key word is emotive, not best or best sounding. It's how it makes you feel.
Yep.
And actually, Cameron said, Chris, you're going to go for the Honda S2000. He said, I bet Chris goes for Honda S2000. Good call. It's a good call. But for me, nothing will replace the feeling. This is a boring answer, I know, but I tell you from the bottom of my tingly bits, the first time I drove on the road a Caterham Superlight R 1.8K series with that beautiful little jewel of a 6-speed gearbox, he's going bop, 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 bop. I just thought, how is this possible and legal?
Yeah.
How is this legal? I can't tell you how it made me feel. And the other one, and Neil's right, it's a Metzger. I mean, this isn't allowed because it was the Metzger engine in that VLN Cup car we raced at the ring. But that Metzger engine and the emotion and how that engine, I had a 997 GT3 RS and it was in the NAS engine. Those two engines made me feel alive.
Yeah, special things. We're going to get so much shit for this. 3 Porsches out of 4, but you know they make great engines. Now, I've got 2 minutes before I have to run, so very quick piece of music from Manish, please.
I'm going to pick Lola up tomorrow.
Wow.
Oh, good.
And I have a plan. First piece of music I'm going to play is Propaganda's Dream Within a Dream. I just think it's a stunning piece of music. As I drive her out of Rockies tomorrow, and she is mine.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Enjoy.
Wow. The end of the journey. Neil, what are you going to have?
I had a curry last week with my mates from Portsmouth, and most of them, unfortunately, aren't dead yet. And we all get together and we reminisced about our 1985 holiday in Lorette de Mar. I was on the youth training scheme at the Fiat garage, and we nicked a Fiat Uno 90, a 4-door, and my mate had a Mark IV 2.3 Cortina gear, and we drove down to Lorette de Mar. And on the first night, never been on holiday on our own together, and all of that normal shit that you have when and don't you forget about me, Simple Minds. And the drums, and it makes me shiver now thinking about it with a bottle of San Miguel.
That is a great
They were the years.
That's fantastic. 2.3 gig Cortina,
green with a vinyl roof, and
must have a vinyl roof. Brown vinyl roof,
black, dark green, black with cloth.
Chris Cooper, piece of music.
I'm in the 80s as well. I was looking at a car somewhere, which I'll tell you about when I see you, which didn't quite go very well. On the way back around the M25, I listened to Heart 80s because I was in a car by myself, and that's what it's for. And on the radio came Rush Hour by Jane Weedlin.
Oh, yeah.
I defy anybody to listen to that in the car and not go a little bit faster.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm my streaming service thing I share with my eldest son, and I look at the history sometimes. I think that wasn't me, and it's a good way of being invited into new music.
Mm.
But also to remind yourself that these young people have got a really good handle on what was cool. And so I was very heartened to see he had A Tribe Called Quest's Can I Kick It on there, because I
Oh,
love that tune. And I was tapping my fingers along to that.
that is good. That is good.
I've got to rush. It's a pleasure having you along. Thank you very much to Manish, the other Chris, to Neil, and to me, from me, Chris Harris. We love having you along, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.